Okay, I think we're going to get started. Does that sound like a good jumping off point for people? So good morning, everyone. We want to welcome you to our second Bright Ideas session, where we really highlight all the amazing evaluation, quality improvement, and research initiatives that we've undertaken in the past year. My name is Donna Petty, and with my colleague, Marianne Robach, we are the Director of Integration Research and Evaluation here at CMHA Ottawa. And we'd like to start our session with a land acknowledgement, and I would invite Marianne to share this with us.
Thank you, Donna. As Donna said, my name is Marianne Robach. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a visitor here on this land as a person of mixed, half Chinese, half white descent. As we gather virtually to discuss the research and evaluation activities of the organization, I would like to ground us by acknowledging that CMHA Ottawa is located on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. We recognize the Anishinaabe as the traditional caretakers and defenders of the land, now known as Ottawa. We are grateful to live and work on the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. As hosts of this event, we also acknowledge the historical and ongoing colonial research practices that have harmed Indigenous peoples, including the misuse of Indigenous peoples' personal information to support exploitation and inequity, as well as the use of Western research methods that dismiss Indigenous data governance and ways of knowing. CMHA makes it our individual, community, and social mission to build connections between non-Indigenous and Indigenous peoples that are based on knowledge of our history and mutually respectful relationships, providing dignity for everyone. We commit to learn, reflect, and take action on our decolonizing journey. This includes in our research and evaluation practices, where we will strive to honor Indigenous voices, expertise, knowledge, and governance. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So the research that you'll hear about today is supported internally here at CMHA by our decision support and accountability team. And I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge our team, many of whom are on the session today and participating. So Marianne and myself, who you've already met, Todd Bridger, Lucy Whitaker, Michael Whitaker, Fatou Fofana, and Christine Muchler, who is our new postdoc research fellow who's just joined us. And really just to reflect for a moment, you know, how much I know I appreciate all the additions that people add to this undertaking and supporting research, whether we're monitoring, analyzing, managing data in clinical files. It really truly does take a village. So I guess we're the village people. And so to start things off, though, I wanted to introduce our executive director, Tim Simboli, and followed by Tim Aubrey from the University of Ottawa, who are going to provide some opening remarks for us. Over to you, Tim. Tim and Tim.
Tim and Tim. You'd think there could be a greater range of names in the housing and homelessness and research business, but here we are, two Tims. One of us is old Tim, one of us is tall Tim. I'll let you figure it out later on. But you know, the impression as I'm looking at the screen here is always that everybody on the screen or everybody on the call is really close to me, you know, if in proximity. And I suspect that we have people from outside of well, certainly outside of CMHA and maybe outside of the Ottawa region. And just for fun, while I'm chatting away here, maybe put in greetings from whatever part of the world you happen to be located in. We can use the chat function, can we not, to do that? So let's just see where everybody's from. So please do that. But so just a few remarks that I want to make about Bright Ideas. And I'd start with noting that, ironically, Bright Ideas is a bright idea. It was dreamed up a couple of years ago. The genesis of the event began probably with Donna and Marianne and a few others on that decision support team taking a look at what we'd been doing and kind of compiling it all and taking a look at it. And it looked like oh gosh, people are pouring in from all over the place. This is great. I think we were struck with the idea or the realization that there actually was an awful lot here, and it was looking at a whole bunch of different things, and for a small little community-based agency, there was some heft to it, and so the idea then, it kind of begged the question, what do you do with all this information? And, I think, researchers are big believers in sharing, and that's what we said we would do is that, okay, so let's move it out and let's open it up. And this day was kind of born, and you'll find that there's a dozen or more topics. It's kind of based on our belief in knowledge mobilization and the obligation that practitioners have to add to the field, particularly in the community-based field, because research and evaluation can be hard to do for community-based organizations that are often operating on a bit of a shoestring, and being able to find the time and the effort to put into some of this. And we've actually, it probably is a collection of maybe a dozen or so passion projects, because these are things that people are really believe in. But there's kind of a deeper meaning to running this day, and it's to be a little bit provocative, to be a little bit bold, to challenge some of the established thinking, and particularly thinking around community-based agencies, and for us to recognize that, yes, we can do research, yes, it's impactful, and yes, it's a responsibility for us. We need to do this. This is part of our, part of what we need to, our contribution to the field, if you would. And the second kind of underlying reason is that it hopefully it builds the validity and the respectability and the for community-based agencies as sources of information, that it's not just, with all due respect to my fellow Tim and others, it's not just something that happens in universities or hospitals or larger institutions. It's out there. And I think the third deep reason is for the clients, because the clients of services ours deserve the best, and the best is the best of what we can think of, and the best of how we can adapt, and the best of how we can collect evidence and prove what we're doing. So I think today, I would suggest you take it as a bit of my strategy for going to an all-you-can-eat restaurant or a smorgasbord. Sample everything. That's what the day's about. You sample everything that's there, and you go back and you eat it and you digest it, and then you're going to find that if you're like me, you still have a bit of appetite for more, and you'll pick something that really tweaked your interest and that you want to find out more. And hopefully this is the start of a beautiful relationship where people can connect with some of these researchers and the folks that are doing the evaluation, and can draw deeper understanding and deeper meaning from it. So that's my 2 cents for this morning, and I get to switch it over now to my confrere Tim Aubry, who, by the way, I have known since high school, and although we've taken kind of different paths, we've often found ourselves in the same room together, to the confusion of others. Anyways, Tim, over to you.
Thanks, Tim. That's 50 years ago, right? Just to remind you in terms of our high school days. But listen,
it might be longer, Tim. It might be longer.
Any other, thanks so much to you and to Donna and Marianne and to CMHA for inviting me and the team from U Ottawa. I know there's also people from Carleton University to be part of this second annual Bright Ideas event. I love the name of the event, but I know some students probably have suggested that it's been a while since I've had a bright idea, but that's okay. But you know, looking over the list, of what's going to be presented today, it's a reflection, quite remarkable, the extent that CMHA Ottawa has become an evidence-based community agency, that really uses research meaningfully to develop and advocate for new and innovative community mental health services and policies. And we need that so much. In fact, I would say that the level of research activity this year represented by these presentations, but also over the last number of years, it's really unparalleled in the community sector. And you mentioned, like, there's presentations today from our graduate courses and program evaluation, from internship and practicum placements, from doctoral theses, projects being taken up by postdoctoral researchers, and a study funded by the Social Sciences Humanities Research Council. I also want to highlight that one of the studies that's being presented today used a randomized controlled trial design, which is close to my heart in terms of because it's really the gold standard for testing effectiveness. And I got to tell you, to do an RCT in a community agency, there's not a lot of examples out there of that being the case. Yes, we see them in hospitals and so on, but to actually be able to do that is quite an accomplishment. And you'll hear about projects that are at different stages. Some are just starting, some are midway, some have been completed, and others have been published. And that has been part of also the process over the last number of years, ensuring there's a real, we hope, a local contribution with the agency, with community mental health services more broadly, and particularly at the provincial level. But we also want to contribute to the knowledge base. So typically these projects do get published. I want to note and really highlight that all the projects involve significant and meaningful collaboration between researchers, staff, and clients at CMHA Ottawa. In fact, you couldn't do this kind of work without the commitment of agency people, the program participants, to being involved. And certainly want to acknowledge and thank the staff and clients of CMHA for their contributions to the projects you're going to hear about today. Of course, this level of research productivity, it wouldn't happen if it wasn't championed by the people at the top. There's a whole area called evaluation capacity building. How do you build a learning organization? And if the folks at the top aren't on board, it's not going to happen. So just take an opportunity to thank Tim for his incredible support to the students, postdocs, and faculty like myself for the past 12 years. Tim, your legacy, it's multifaceted. You've got that beautiful building, new services, growth in services, but also you've really moved the agency along into a direction that values and uses very effectively evidence to build and improve its services. So kudos and thank you, Tim Sr. And now on to hearing about bright ideas. And I'm going to put my sunglasses on for that. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim and Tim. And I would echo Tim Jr.'s comments and thanking Tim as someone who's been at the agency. And it is important to have that endorsement and leadership and support. And Tim, I'm going to start crying. This is why I don't get put in charge of these things. I have emotional incontinence, but Tim is leaving. But we're so happy to know that Dr. Susan Farrell is going to be our new leader, and she knows a thing or two about research too. So we're pretty excited that that will, maybe probably be able to continue on. So all that's good. I have to stop now about that. Anyway, okay. So you can see on the agenda, once I put it up here, that we have grouped the presentations in different, oh, I got the wrong thing here. Oh, well, let me see here. See, anyway. So what we've done today, we've grouped the presentations into three different areas, and each of the presenters will have up to 10 minutes to present highlights of their work. We don't usually have time for questions, but if you would like to put questions in the chat, in the past, we've been able to communicate with the presenters and give them that question so they can get back to you. We also will be providing a summary, and these proceedings are recorded, and it will be sent to everyone who is registered. And it's also posted on our website. So sometimes that's just the easiest thing for people to do in terms of having access to the proceedings, as last year's Bright Ideas #1 is still there. So we're going to get started. And now this may take me a second or two because I'm actually doing the first presentation. And I have far too many screens open here today. And here we go. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to start things off by talking about this randomized controlled trial that Tim referenced. So this is, we were able to have this study. It was published this year. And this is an examination of the effectiveness of smoking cessation treatment interventions for individuals with severe mental illness, a randomized controlled trial. And the paper is authored by myself and Jennifer Ray. At the time, we were both PhD doctoral candidates, and Tim Aubrey was both of our supervisor at the time. So as Tim referred to, this notion of conducting a randomized controlled trial under any circumstances, but at a community mental health agency, it does involve unlocking many doors and providing a smoking cessation intervention to individuals with severe mental illness. That involves unlocking many doors as well. But I just wanted to highlight that through our partners with the University of Ottawa, and for this study, the University of Ottawa Heart Institute, our great in-house team. So this is our Take a Breath team. You can see we have our group facilitators, MI counselors, nursing support, the research team, data support, all of the CMHA case managers and supervisors, the University of Ottawa Heart Institute, and of course, the study participants. So you can see the complexity and how complicated it can be to get everything organized and up and running, but it is possible to do. And that's really one of the points that I want to make in terms of this. So the first thing we look at is, well, what's the rationale for even doing this research? And obviously there's a high prevalence of smoking in the population. The general prevalence in the general population is about 12% now, phenomenal decrease. It can be upwards of 70% for our clients. And not surprisingly, our folks experience tobacco-related health disparities disproportionately. So upwards of 50% of individuals with schizophrenia and mood disorders die of tobacco-related illness. So this is a pretty strong rationale for us investigating this and trying to figure out, oh goodness, what can we do about this? There is a lack of access, barriers to treatment. We wanted to address that. There's certainly a lack of clinical trials, and it has been identified as a priority area and continues to be. When we look at, for the actual study, we randomized 62 people. So 30 people to the smoking cessation plus arm of the study and 30 people to the smoking cessation routine. And one person actually moved from the province before the treatment began. So that left us 29 people in the smoking cessation routine arm of the study. All participants in both arms received nicotine replacement therapy at the level required to meet their individual level of dependency. The smoking cessation plus group were also offered up to 24 weeks of group treatment and 2 sessions of MI therapy. And we wanted to see if offering NRT would be effective overall, regardless of what arm of the study folks were in. But then if the additional offer of group and individual support would provide any additional benefit. So who was in the study? The number of comorbid physical conditions was almost 6. So that could be diabetes, COPD, heart disease, hepatitis, HIV. On average, people had spent almost 2.5 years homeless. 74% had a co-occurring substance use disorder. And yet the average age was 44. So we're not talking, I mean, this is a pretty young bunch of folks to have all of these challenges with them. 25% started using tobacco between the ages of 7 and 10, and similarly for their use of drugs and alcohol. But this is the thing, and this is one of the myth busters here. 82% said they wanted to quit within the next 30 days. People just assume individuals with SMI have no interest in quitting smoking or reducing, and that's just not true. So people were very, very interested in this. So what did we find in terms of our primary smoking related outcomes? If we look at the change in number of cigarettes smoked, at baseline between the 2 groups, there was no difference, and that's good because you want the groups to be even. Similarly, for those demographic variables I described, there was really no difference between the 2 groups either. So that's all good because we wanted to make sure they were pretty even. There was no difference between the 2 groups in terms of change of number of cigarettes smoked, but for both groups, there was a statistically significant reduction of cigarettes. So they went from 25 at baseline to 12 at 6 months, and that was pretty much sustained at 6 months to 12 cigarettes as well. Similarly, for nicotine dependency, no difference between the groups, but statistically significant decrease in both groups at 3 months and at 6 months. These are all good things. We look at the primary smoking related outcomes. So who were the quitters, who remained smoking? Again, there was no difference between the group, and overall at 3 months, 18% were quitters and 10% sustained that at 6 months. Now, there were more quitters in the smoking cessation plus group, but the numbers were too small to make anything beyond a suggestion that perhaps if we did a bigger trial, we had more and more people, we would start to see more results. And this is kind of supported by when we looked at the outcomes in terms of individuals who were as treated. So what that meant was all the people that were in the study, we looked at only people who actually received a certain dose of treatment. So in this case, it would have been anyone, it didn't matter what arm they were in, if they received up to 12 weeks of NRT or more, they went to 12 weeks or more of the group if they were in the plus, and they received both MI sessions. So those people were considered the treated individuals, and their quit rate was much higher. It's much higher in the smoking cessation plus arm, but again, the numbers were too small to definitively say it was statistically significant, but it was starting to suggest, again, if we had more people in the study. The one outcome that was really wonderful to see and totally unanticipated, people's physical health increased statistically significantly from 41 on the SF-36 to over 45. Now, again, these numbers are themselves very low, but the fact that they increased in such a short period of time was really amazing to see. But it also reflects that overall, this is a very, very compromised, physically compromised population. So our predictors of smoking status at 6 months, basically the more contact people had, whether it was weeks of NRT or interventions and meetings with the nursing contacts, quitters had a mean total of 26 nursing contacts versus 18 for people who remained smokers. So there was that was statistically significant. And similarly, the quitters had 17 weeks of NRT treatment compared to 10 for people who remained smokers. From research to sustained practice and treatment. This is another really, really important aspect of this. So it's not just conducting research in a petri dish. We want to, and we have sustained this in practice. So all clients are assessed for tobacco dependency. They're offered support to reduce or quit. NRT is provided at the needed assessed level. Group and individual support is offered. We also assess and support for co-smoking, which is cannabis use and tobacco. Last year, there was 160 clients supported in 50 tobacco freedom sessions. So these are our two staff. Charlene, looks like she's guarding her NRT stash in her cupboard there. And Joanne Haddad, who is meeting with someone to provide smoking cessation to them. So conclusions in all of this, I'm just going to highlight a few here. Smoking cessation and reduction can be successfully introduced into a very vulnerable population of individuals with severe mental illness. People want that support, and it's important that we provide it. And it is possible to conduct research in a real world setting with a highly marginalized population. And we've really benefited as an agency these additional benefits as we develop clinical expertise and uptake of evidence-based practice within other disciplines. That has increased important access to this vulnerable population. You know, before this, our clients had no access. This wasn't a priority. We actually used to hand out cigarettes back in the day, as many people did. And that's not part of our practice now at all. In fact, it's written into our policy. So from this actual study, we've had 3 publications, a qualitative paper that Jennifer worked on, and an assessment that Tim and I did on the smoking behaviors. So the use of contraband, smoking cigarette butts, picking up discarded cigarettes, that sort of thing, as well as the NRT. And that's it. So I hope I made it under 10 minutes. That wouldn't be good if I didn't. So our next presenter is Jonathan Samash, who is a PhD candidate in clinical psychology from the University of Ottawa. And he's going to present on community mental health services for frequent emergency department users, qualitative outcomes perceived by service users and case managers. Take it away, Jonathan.
Thank you, Donna. Okay. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be with you today. As Donna mentioned, I'm Jonathan Samash, a PhD student at the University of Ottawa, and I'm part of a research team led by doctors Tim Aubry and John Sylvestre, conducting research in collaboration with CMHA Ottawa for many years now. For those of you who I've met over those years, you're probably wondering how I still haven't graduated yet. But as I've said to you for the last 4 years, don't worry, this is my last year of grad school. So one of these years that must become true, right? In any event, I'm really glad to be here today to present a portion of our research findings regarding the outcomes of CMHA Ottawa's Familiar Faces program, which aims to support frequent emergency department visitors with mental illness or addiction concerns. So hospital emergency departments are designed to help best for things like putting a cast on a broken bone or stitching up a wound, but they're not designed as much to assist with mental illness or addiction concerns. And we know that a small group of emerged visitors with mental illness or addictions make up a disproportionately large amount of total emerged visits, partly because these individuals don't know where else to go, maybe there is nowhere else to go, and also partly because their concerns aren't really managed when they do go to emerge, which leads to repeatedly visiting, looking for help, but to no avail. This also leads to increased healthcare costs and longer emerge wait times. As a result, many stakeholders have been increasingly interested in how to help these frequent emerge visitors to get the help they need and free up the emerge for other services. So two types of community mental health services that can be offered as an alternative to emerge visits are system navigation and intensive case management. System navigation refers to providing support to reduce barriers, getting connected with needed services, and intensive case management refers to more intensive support of service user health and social needs. So the Familiar Faces program at CMHA Ottawa receives referrals from Ottawa area hospitals after a frequent emerge visitor with mental illness or addiction concerns is identified in the electronic hospital record system. And if the referred individual wants to participate in the program, they can receive up to 3 months of system navigation support. And if they need further assistance, then they can be transferred into the program's case management service for up to a further 9 months. And the purpose of all this is to help these service users get the help they actually need while reducing the frequent emerge visits. So our research aimed to investigate what the outcomes of this Familiar Faces program are, and if there are any particular variables that really supported or got in the way of clients benefiting from the program. And so to answer these questions, we used qualitative research methods, meaning we interviewed 15 program clients who had received both system navigation and case management supports. And we also conducted focus groups with 6 of the program case managers. We then took the transcripts of those interviews and focus groups and analyzed them for any themes that would help answer our research questions. So as a result of receiving Familiar Faces program services, this is what participants said were the outcomes of being in the program. So first off, nobody identified any negative or harmful consequences of being in the program, okay? However, to some people, a small proportion of responses identified that being in the program did not assist to change addiction symptoms, emerge use, future outlook, meaning how one kind of views their future potential to heal and grow, as well as mental illness symptoms and suicidal or self-harm ideation or behavior. But again, this was all a small number of responses indicating no change on those outcomes. Far more responses, though, highlighted positive benefits of participating in the program, including related to addiction symptoms, obtaining access to additional services like healthcare or social services, coping skills, reduced emerge use, education, employment, finances, future outlook, giving back, meaning clients felt inspired to share what they had received from the program with others to help others also benefit from it, housing, mental illness symptoms, quality of life, interpersonal relationships, and reduced suicidal or self-harm ideation or behavior. So lots of positive perceptions of how the program helped clients, okay? And then based on those results, we also looked at if there were any particular mechanisms of change that really supported these positive outcomes, and if there were any particular barriers to change that really got in the way of clients pursuing these positive outcomes. And here's what we found. So first, some barriers to change were perceived, although again, by only a small proportion of study participants, But still, those barriers that were identified included client characteristics, like especially readiness for change, intensity of support, like some clients needing more support than the program could provide, program duration, meaning they felt the program was too short, and systemic issues like housing shortages, stigma in the community, these kinds of things. But participants much more frequently identified mechanisms of change in the program that they felt really supported the achievement of positive outcomes for clients. And those included access to services, referring to CMHA Ottawa's great network of connections to other resources, both within the organization and also the broader community. Also, intensity of support. So in this case, meaning that most participants felt that plenty of support was provided to obtain positive change in the lives of clients. Also, practical skills development, meaning there was lots of really practical skills building and coping strategies developed to assist clients. And also therapeutic relationship. Indeed, the strong relationship between program clients and program staff was by far the most identified mechanism of change that was perceived to really support clients the most in the program to achieve positive outcomes, with particular emphasis placed on the warmth, compassion, authenticity, trust, non-judgment, patience, competence, and consistency of the Familiar Faces program staff. And so I'd like to show you a few examples of what research participants said about the importance of this relationship, because it was highlighted so frequently, and it's really quite moving and a testament, I think, to the work you all do here at CMHA. So one case manager told us, and others agreed, that going into the community and meeting the client there is literally you meeting them where they're at. And that is so important in your relationship with them. You're doing what you can to meet the client where they're at. That really benefits them because then they know that you're really there for them and you're not there just for yourself or your numbers. And the power of that approach was not lost on the program clients we interviewed. Here's what a few of them had to say about the positive impact of their relationship with program staff. So one client said, I think the human connection of Familiar Faces is really the aspect that I would sell to somebody. It's not something that you should be anxious about when you call in and talk to program staff. They're personable, they're very warm and kind. Another said, the world was terrifying, and through the warmth and support of program staff, it has really inspired me to change. Another said, how could I describe how amazing you feel once you start having a worker and start having them come over and help you really realize that you can actually work on your mental health. At first, you don't feel that, but when you're with CMHA, they completely change your life. And finally, another client said, program staff are very professional and they are very knowledgeable and they are very friendly and approachable. And I don't think I would be alive today without them. So powerful statements, and there were many more like that throughout this research. So what we see here is study participants overall perceived that CMHA Ottawa's Familiar Faces program, including system navigation and intensive case management, effectively supported the needs of frequent emergency department visitors with mental illness or addiction concerns, while reducing resource burden on the emerge. And they perceived that the most significant variable promoting positive change for clients was the relationship developed between clients and staff. Okay, so that's just a kind of quick, what we learned from this research, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to share that all with you today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. And I hope some of the Familiar Faces staff are on the call today and get a chance to hear those wonderful reflections. So our next presentation is on the social prescribing project, and these are some early findings from a needs assessment and presented by Minda Wood and Elise McCall-Thomas, who are both PhD students at the University of Ottawa. So welcome, Minda and Elise.
Thanks, Donna. Hopefully everyone can see my screen, and good morning. My name is Minda Wood, as Donna just mentioned, and I'm a PhD student at the University of Ottawa and also a research assistant on the social prescribing project, which we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Elise to introduce herself and get us started.
Thanks, Minda. So my name is Elise, and I'm also a PhD student at the University of Ottawa. And like Minda, I am a research assistant on this project. So just wanted to start by telling you a little bit about the social prescribing project. So this is a joint effort between the University of Ottawa and Housing First programs with CMHA and Options by Town. The idea is to build social prescription into Housing First programming. And then for those of you who may not be familiar with social prescription, it's an intervention that helps connect individuals with social and community resources or activities to help address isolation and exclusion. There are 3 objectives to this project. The first is to identify the needs of Housing First clients when it comes to engaging in community activities. The second is to build an intervention that incorporates a social prescription approach to connect Housing First clients with community activities. And then the third is to pilot and assess the intervention as it's implemented and share learnings with Options by Town, CMHA, and Housing First more broadly. So there are 3 phases to this project. So the first phase is a needs assessment, and that's the phase that we're currently in. And really what we're focusing on is how to develop the intervention based on an understanding of how case managers work with their clients, the needs of Housing First clients, the obstacles they may and do face when it comes to connecting with their communities, as well as the type of activities that clients may want to engage in to help them connect with their community. So as part of this, we have conducted focus groups with case managers at CMHA and Options by Town, as well as focus groups with clients, Housing First clients of both organizations. And we're just finishing up some interviews now with managers, and may also conduct some interviews with peer support workers, because we've been learning through this needs assessment. They're also a key player within with working with Housing First clients. The next phase, or phase 2, so it's basically in 2 parts. So the first is what we would call a formative evaluation. And this is when we really pilot the intervention by prescribing social activities to small groups of Housing First clients at CMHA and Options by Town. And then part of this work would also involve checking in with clients and case managers during the intervention to see how it's working and if adjustments are required. So you can see there's research questions that we would try to answer, and we have those questions for phases 1, 2, and 3. The second part of phase 2 is more of an outcomes assessment, and that's when we assess how the intervention worked, what results it produced for Housing First clients. For example, did they experience improvement in their level of community engagement? And this will be understood through interviews with Housing First clients. And then the last phase is knowledge mobilization. So at this phase, findings from the project will be shared through presentation and journal articles, and will also lead to the development and dissemination of a toolkit that outlines how the interaction can be incorporated into other Housing First programs. So I apologize, it was a really quick overview, but we wanted to spend more time on the second part of this presentation, which Minda will share with you now, which is more around the preliminary themes and findings on the work that we've already done.
Thanks, Elise. So just to kind of review what Elise just said and give an update on the current project status, we're currently almost complete with phase 1, which is the needs assessments. And so more specifically, we've completed the focus groups with case managers from both agencies from December 2022 to January 2023. We completed the focus groups with housing and interviews with Housing First clients in March of this year, and we have some lingering interviews that will be completed in June. And we also started the key informant interviews with program managers in April, and they're currently ongoing. We also have a draft of the community asset map, which I'm going to give an overview of in the next slide, but that's been ongoing since October 2022. So just to briefly look ahead, the expected timeline for phase 2, the formative and outcome evaluation, is July 2023 to 2024. And the expected timeline for phase 3, the knowledge mobilization, is July to December 2024. So before I jump into discussing some of the preliminary themes and findings coming out of the needs assessment, I wanted to give an overview of what the community asset map is and what we have so far. So at this point in time, the community asset map is an inventory or list of about 180 local Ottawa activities, programs, and resources compiled in an Excel spreadsheet that may be of interest to Housing First clients. So the inventory was developed through extensive online searches using the City of Ottawa's programming as a starting point. And it's also been further informed by the focus groups with clients and case managers and the interviews. So the idea of it is intended to be used as a tool for Housing First clients to use with their case managers to connect them to the community. So the programs and activities within the inventory are organized categorically. So for example, we have fine arts programs like dance classes and music lessons, visual arts programs like sketching, painting, drawing, sports and physical fitness programs, reading and writing, outdoor activities, museums, skill building programs, volunteering opportunities, cultural communities, and activities, and cooking, just to name a few of some of the categories. It's a little bit more extensive than that, but that's kind of a broad overview. And it also includes important program activity and information. So things like descriptions of what the programs are, affiliated organizations, how to access said program or activity, cost and funding information, and transportation information. So now jumping into the preliminary themes and findings, we haven't analyzed the data yet, but we wanted to briefly discuss some of the things that have been coming out of the focus groups and interviews with Housing First clients, case managers from both agencies, and program managers from both agencies. So as you can see on the slide here, the main themes and findings that have been coming out are barriers to social and community connections, facilitators to social and communities connections, the concept of volunteering and how that fits into the intervention, and considerations for the development of the intervention and the community asset map. So in terms of barriers, it's been mentioned numerous times from multiple data sources that connections or opportunities for connections may be limited for this client population, as they often have severe mental illness and or co-occurring substance use or severe trauma. And so as a result, they don't feel as though they fit in the community. And so the ranges of places they can go to and feel as though they belong in becomes limited. So some of the specific barriers that have been mentioned in the interviews and focus groups include addiction and mental health issues, like I just said, stigma, social anxiety or a lack of confidence, no IDs, criminal history, lack of social support, limited access to transportation, and the cost of certain programs and activities. Alongside this, though, the theme of facilitators, so things that would encourage or help clients to form social and community connections, has also come up in the focus groups and interviews. So more specifically, some of the facilitators that have been mentioned is knowing what programs and activities are available in the community. So this emphasizes the important role of the community asset map in identifying what's available locally. And having someone to go with or accompany clients to activities has also been mentioned as a facilitator to help that, social anxiety or lack of confidence. And then also flexibility in terms of how clients participate. So this is meaning having options for more informal drop-in type of activities versus just structured formal types of programs. One of the other prominent themes that have arisen is the idea of volunteering as a source of social and community connection. It seems as though most Housing First clients across both partnering agencies are intrinsically interested in volunteering, and perhaps even more so than recreational and leisure type of activities. So it's this notion of wanting to give back to the community and the sense of meaning and purpose that provides. So we're currently trying to work out how to fit this into the intervention in the best way. And then finally, considerations for developing the intervention and the community asset map have come up. And so the most prominent of these are the importance of including safe and accepting spaces into activities into the community asset map, given the population that we're working with. Financial considerations have also come up. So like I mentioned, the cost of certain programs and activities has been noted as a barrier. So we're currently looking into funding opportunities to overcome that barrier. And then finally, another consideration is flexibility in terms of what social and community connection might look like for clients. So this might range from participating in formal kind of programs and activities to pursuing hobbies or interests to even going to a coffee shop. So we're developing it around that notion of flexibility, but also including options for independent versus group activities, less structured activities, that kind of thing. So we wanted to conclude by just providing some implications and contributions. Given the multidisciplinary nature of this project, it does have implications across many sectors, including social work, psychology, community interventions, health and voluntary services, and it impacts stakeholders beyond academia, including our partnering agencies, CMHA and Options by Town. This project is going to help their clients in the Housing First programs to reintegrate into the community through participation in social, recreational, volunteer, educational, and cultural activities, and will include the provision of a toolkit to assist both CMHA and Options by Town to integrate social prescribing into the community support they offer. And in terms of the implications for Housing First clients, this project contributes to improving the lives of some of the most vulnerable and underserved people in Canada by providing real supports and services to people who are highly marginalized and socially excluded, focusing on enhancing their rights to citizen participation while also addressing their rights to long-term housing. And finally, this project also makes a significant contribution to housing and homelessness research, as well as social prescribing research by piloting an enhancement to Housing First programs that could improve the long-term social outcomes of people with serious mental illness who were previously homeless. So that's everything we have today. Thank you for listening. We're happy to answer any questions you may have, and you can email us at one of the email addresses below. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minda and Elise. That was great. And like with Jonathan's research, the indications for next year, because there's more findings and more investigations to be had. But I agree, like this whole notion of how do we support people once they're housed so people feel meaningfully integrated into the community. It's really, really amazing and cutting edge work to be looking at. So our next project is actually a video. We've got a few folks that were not able to attend in person, but sent through the wonders of virtualness, a video. And this is the Fresh Veggies for Clients at CMHA, a pilot program evaluation. Danielle Charland, who is the medical student that undertook this evaluation. Every year we get certain medical students, we identify different programs, and medical students who are interested in helping us out sign up for them. So this was a project that Danielle was involved in. So I think somebody, I hope I'm not in charge of activating the video. That's good. It's not me. Okay. Excellent. Makes me hungry just to look at that picture.
Mm-hmm. So the program itself. Sorry, so give me a second here. Come on, Danielle. Oh, there. Hi everyone, my name is Danielle, and I recorded this video to present my project, which was the Fresh Veggies for Clients of CMHA Ottawa, Increasing Nutrition Opportunities for Clients, which was a pilot project evaluation. I was able to do this project in partnership with Marianne Roebuck, and I appreciate her support throughout. So the program itself, the Fresh Veggies pilot, included 16 participants at one time. There was an increase up to 21 participants throughout the entire project, but there's always only 16 participants active. And to participate, participants had to qualify by currently living in housing where they would be able to store these vegetables, and also having an interest in cooking and eating these fresh vegetables. The reason for this pilot program was to combat the increasing cost of food, including the cost of fresh vegetables, and to combat diabetes, heart disease, obesity, and other chronic health conditions. The boxes themselves were prepared every 2 weeks. They included 8 to 11 fresh seasonal vegetables. These boxes included a base of staple veggies, so your carrots, tomatoes, onions, lettuce, and greens, as well as a complement of seasonal veggies, including the eggplant, zucchini, kale, squash, and garlic. And there was also some flexibility in content according to the participants' wants and needs. The program itself included a drop-off and pickup points at several sites throughout the city, 2 of which were very close to 311 MacArthur, the headquarters for CMHA Ottawa. There was also information provided on how to use the veggies and how to store these veggies included with the boxes, a weekly newsletter that is sent to all participants of the program. And this was a community-supported agriculture effort, meaning that the veggies are coming fresh from the farm to the participants, to the household, and kind of including the community-based partnership between farming and the consumers. So our study went through 5 steps. First and foremost, there was the logic model, so deciding how we wanted to evaluate the pilot project, what we wanted to focus on, and how that could be done. Also identifying what was the major parts of the logic model, so who were stakeholders, what were the different components that needed to be tested, and how we would want to take in that feedback. Then there was the evaluation matrix. So the evaluation matrix kind of gave a good layout of how we would ask each of these components, what kind of questions we want to be addressed, to who we would want to address these questions, and how we would want to interpret those results. Then we completed an online survey for participants and frontline staff. So these were 2 separate surveys. They were done online. There's more information in the upcoming slides, but both very short surveys just to have a sense of what they felt like the program went. And to also get input from another key stakeholder in this project, we did a qualitative interview with the pilot project farmers. And this was just over the phone. And again, similar questions that were taken out from the evaluation matrix in that second step of our study. So the surveys themselves were done on Microsoft Forms online. We received 8 responses from participants and 7 responses from frontline staff. They were accessible over the phone, computer, or tablet, and participants really only needed an internet connection to be able to access them. And they were also completely anonymous, so that no one could be identified based on their responses to the survey, so that they would be able to share their true opinions. And the surveys were kept pretty short in order to maximize response rate. So there was about 10 questions for participants and 12 questions for frontline staff. And these surveys were open online for a period of about 2 weeks, and the multiple reminders were sent to both participants of the program and the frontline staff to fill out these surveys. So for the participant survey, we received 8 responses, like I mentioned previously. Overall, they rated the program at a 9.88 out of 10, which is a very positive response, and 100% would participate again, which is also very encouraging. What participants really enjoyed about the program was that there was accessibility to healthy food, accessibility to local vegetables, the freshness of these vegetables, and also the variety that they had available to them. And one of the quotes that stood out to us while reviewing the results was that the vegetables were exceptional quality and better than I've ever had access to, even from the grocery store. Also, the fact that they were organic was something I've never been able to afford, and it was a huge gift and wonderful experience. So having that anecdotal account, as well as those very positive statistical results, was something that was very encouraging and indicated to us that participants were willing to do a project like this again, and that the pilot project was a success from their point of view. In regards to the frontline staff survey, we received 7 responses. They rated the overall experience at an 8.86, and 86% would definitely participate again, while 14% would maybe participate again. We also took a moment to ask frontline staff who they thought this project could suit best in order to potentially reevaluate the inclusion criteria for participants in upcoming years. And their response is Responses included mobile and a participant that is independent and motivated, that don't have access to fresh produce otherwise, that enjoy cooking and are easily reached. And another quote that stood out to us while reviewing the results was that this program was absolutely amazing. My client mentioned how great it was to have access to fresh vegetables, as he could rarely afford them at the store. The generosity and the variety of the vegetables was wonderful. Thanks so much for providing this great opportunity to my client. So again, the anecdotal as well as statistical results of the frontline staff survey was very encouraging that this pilot project was a success from their point of view. And then for the key format qualitative interview, I just spent an hour with the farmers getting to know their perspective, how the project had compared to past initiatives that they had taken part of, and the results were as follows. So the involvement itself required limited extra time compared to their typical clients. So really just that sign up process, because it was CMHA that provided the names, only the first name, not last names, to keep anonymity for the participants, and did the payment, just had that extra step of going through for all the participants. But otherwise, they had delivered 89 boxes through this program, which comes up to a value of $4,000 or just above. The farmers felt like the strength of this program was first the partnership with the CMHA, especially because in the past they have a hard time sometimes identifying who this could help, how to before their philanthropic efforts. But the CMHA they felt was a great partnership in terms of identifying who this could help, and also having access to frontline staff to communicate with in case there's ever any problems, if there was ever any troubles with pickup, or any communications of the sort. They also enjoyed that there was a lack of stigmatization. So participants would go to these pickup spots, those 7 or so pickup spots mentioned earlier, just the same as any of their other paying customers would go to pick up their fresh boxes on a bi-weekly basis. So really it takes away a bit of that stigmatization that other food security projects have done in the past. So say food stamps or food bank or a soup kitchen. And they also like that they increased access for these participants to fresh vegetables, fresh food, and a healthy diet. So a couple obstacles that they faced throughout the pilot, they reassured me that these were very minor and nothing too big, but worth mentioning was sometimes a bit more complicated to manage those client switching. As I mentioned previously, overall there was 21 participants, but at one time only 16. And in terms of some miscommunication occurred when it came to pickup or making sure that everyone had their boxes on time. Overall, they found that the experience was positive and rewarding. They would rate it a 9 out of 10. They would definitely want to repeat a project like this again, and really felt like it was one of the strongest programs they've ever taken part of when it comes to helping combat food insecurity. And also like that this program has a great potential to be sustainable and to be repeated in multiple years ahead. So the next steps, so our presentation today, as well as the final study report, so outlining the study details and finalizing study recommendations. But some preliminary recommendations for this upcoming summer, because I'm happy to say that the project will take place again this summer, is the pickup location, maybe including 311 MacArthur as a pickup location, because it would be easier to communicate with frontline staff and for pickup for participants, as they know the location and know how they get there. To maybe include a reminder for participants so they're always able to receive their boxes, and to also reevaluate the participation criteria according to what we heard from the frontline staff in that survey result, but really doing some small tweaks to the program, because overall it was a very positive experience and received positive feedback. So at this time, I just want to thank CMHA for letting me do this project throughout the school year. I really appreciated having the chance to do a research project that was community-based. And again, I would like to thank Marianne for all of her help throughout this. So thank you very much, and thank you for including me in the conference today.
You're muted, Donna.
Just an important reflection for folks that very seldom have access to really good food, and we're really happy that it's going to go ahead again this summer. So the next group of presentations are really under a heading of understanding the needs of service users. And our presenters here are Valerie Schutt and Ali Hayes, who are students in the graduate micro program on evaluation of social and health programs and policies in the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of Ottawa. And it's a needs assessment for discharge planning from intensive case management services at CMHA. So welcome, Ali and Valerie.
Hi, everyone. So great to join you all today, and I hope the slides are going through okay. So as Donna said, my name's Ali, and I'm joined by my co-presenter, Valerie. And today we have the pleasure of discussing with you how discharge planning can be integrated into intensive case management, or ICM, at CMHA Ottawa. So our presentation is based on a needs assessment that we conducted of discharge planning from ICM at CMHA Ottawa as part of a micro program on evaluation of social and health programs and policies at the University of Ottawa. So let's begin with a brief description of the program component that we evaluated, which, as I mentioned, was discharge planning from ICM. So in ICM, clients work with their case manager using a client-focused, strength-based approach to achieve their personal recovery goals and to prepare to maintain their stability, independence, and quality of life when they eventually transition out of ICM. So this process of preparing a client to move on and identifying when they're ready to graduate is called discharge planning, and this was the focus of our evaluation. So to evaluate discharge planning from ICM, we did a type of evaluation called a needs assessment. So a needs assessment essentially answers questions about what a program aims to address, who is involved, and then what their specific needs are. So the goal of our specific needs assessment was to determine how discharge planning should be integrated into ICM at CMHA. And we did this by answering 4 evaluation questions. So the first one was, how can intensive case managers identify clients who are ready for discharge? Number 2 was, what are the needs of clients during discharge planning? Number 3, what are the needs of intensive case managers during discharge planning? And number 4, how should discharge planning be integrated into ICM at CMHA Ottawa?
All right, so let's talk about how we answered these questions. Our needs assessment had 3 phases. The first phase was when we prepared for the needs assessment. So we assembled the Needs Assessment Advisory Council of 8 people with expertise and experience with discharge and intensive case management, including current and former clients, case managers, and the Manager of Quality Assurance and Improvement. Then we explored discharge planning from ICM. We did this by reviewing CMHA Ottawa's administrative documents and by consulting members of the Advisory Council. We did a literature review to learn the research evidence, and then we used all that information to create a logic model for discharge planning from ICM and a plan for the needs assessment in collaboration with the Advisory Council. Then the second phase was when we did the needs assessment. So we collected data through focus group discussions with 6 current and former clients, surveys of 12 case managers, interviews with 2 case managers, and then interviews with 3 program managers. So in total, we collected data from 24 individuals, and then we analyzed this data using thematic analysis and descriptive statistics. Then the third phase was when we co-developed recommendations based on the findings with the Advisory Council.
So what did we find? Let's start by chatting about what we found out about how case managers can identify clients who are ready for discharge. So we found that there are several signs that a client may be ready for discharge or to move on. One being that the client has achieved their personal recovery goals. Maybe the client doesn't have active personal recovery goals or is able to achieve these goals without a case manager. Another sign was that the client is stable, or that the client mainly wants check-ins and counseling instead of actively working on goals that are specific to ICM services, or the client is disengaged and missing a lot of sessions. There's also several tools that can help determine when a client is ready for discharge, and the 4 that participants ranked as the most important were shared decision-making between a case manager and client, the client's progress towards their personal recovery goals, the case manager's professional judgment of client stability, and then discussions, such as those between clients and their case managers and their resource group, and case managers and their program managers.
All right, so let's talk about the needs of clients during discharge planning. clients need to be actively involved during planning, and they need to know how to stay connected to CMHA Ottawa after discharge. So that includes what services they can access and how they can be readmitted if applicable. Clients need to have support managing feelings related to discharge, such as anxiety, abandonment, grief, loneliness, anger, or guilt. Clients need to have support navigating their relationships with their case manager, particularly potential relationships of dependency. Clients need to be empowered, so meaning they need to see themselves and to be seen as strong and capable. They need to feel safe during discharge planning and when it's eventually time to move on. They need to have a sense of the timeline for discharge, and they need to be connected to supports beyond CMHA to promote continuity of care as they move on.
So looking now at the needs of case managers during discharge planning, we found that case managers really need to communicate openly and clearly with clients about discharge from the beginning and throughout a client's service journey. And they need to have appropriate community resources or services to discharge clients to. We found they also need to get reminders that discharge can be good for clients, and then they also need to be sensitive and flexible to each client, as discharge planning isn't one size fits all. We also found that case managers need to have prepared clients with the knowledge and skills to live independently after discharge, which really involves doing things with, not for clients during service. And we found that case managers really need support managing their relationships with clients, their feelings and concerns when discharging clients, and then the pushback that they sometimes receive from partners, such as the client's family members or their psychiatrist. Their final need that we identified was that case managers need to have regular meetings and support for their program manager.
So what does all this mean for how discharge planning could or should be integrated into ICM at CMHA Ottawa? There were 7 key recommendations that we co-developed with the Advisory Council based on the findings from our 4th evaluation question. So the first recommendation is to have discharge planning be an open, clear, and ongoing conversation from the very start of a client's ICM service and throughout their journey through the service. So staff suggested that CMHA Ottawa could have a policy about discharge from ICM, and that this policy could be included in a client's intake paperwork so that it comes up during that initial conversation about the service. The second recommendation is to introduce a gradual and consistent approach to discharge planning for all clients with room for flexibility for each client. So clients throughout the entire needs assessment explained that they want a gradual approach where they can spread out their sessions with their case manager and gradually be connected with other services instead. The third recommendation is to support clients to manage emotions associated with discharge planning and to prepare them to pursue the best possible mental health and well-being after discharge. So all participants suggested that CMHA Ottawa could provide sessions to help clients prepare for and then manage feelings associated with discharge. And clients requested certain documentation that could help them in this process, such as a certificate showing that they have graduated, letters of encouragement from their peers and their case manager, or a recovery resume that they can share with any future service providers that they come into contact with, so that it's all in one place, what skills they've acquired and what knowledge they have about their mental health and well-being from ICM. And then the fourth recommendation is to engage clients meaningfully as partners in discharge planning. So clients requested supports that could help them to engage more actively and meaningfully in discharge planning. So this could include a sample list of questions of what to ask their case manager about discharge and discharge planning, or that checklist for discharge planning so that they know from the start of ICM what they should be working towards.
So our 5th recommendation was to connect clients with other supports within CMH Ottawa and the community throughout ICM services. The participants from all groups really said that clients should be increasingly connected to supports beyond CMHA. These supports could then be included in the list of resources that a client is given at discharge, the client's aftercare plan, and the client's community care plan. Our 6th recommendation was to clarify how clients could stay connected to CMHA Ottawa after discharge. The clients said that they really want to know what services they can continue to access after discharge and what activities they can still attend. One suggestion that came up was that CMHA Ottawa could create an ICM alumni group so that clients and the case managers could stay connected and supported after discharge. And clients also requested check-ins after discharge so they can continue reflecting on what they learned and applying their skills and knowledge. Then our final recommendation is to support case managers throughout discharge planning and the discharge process. So staff had a number of suggestions about what these supports might look like, including the opportunity to present cases to a broader team, policy and procedures about what to do when a client is disengaged from ICM services, and also a service directory and resource repository to use for information and referrals for clients.
So the recommendations generated through this evaluation highlight inspiring and innovative opportunities that clients and staff see for improving discharge planning. So CMHA Ottawa may wish to draw on the recommendations and to continue to leverage the passion and the expertise of their clients and staff as they look to integrate discharge planning into ICM. So thanks for your interest in discharge planning. I don't think we have time for questions, but you are welcome to connect with us through our emails. Thanks.
You're muted, Donna.
Go again. Oh, it's giving me a notice now besides you, Marianne. Thank you. So it's just a link with the social prescribing project and hopefully what we can learn from that and apply it for the discharge planning. Anyway, it's very interesting. Our next presentation is around intensive case management, length of time in service, characteristics of people in ICM longer than 5 years. And this is Todd Bridger and Marianne Roebuck who will be doing this presentation.
Thanks, Donna. Thanks, everyone, for your interest in this presentation. This study complements Valerie and Ali's needs assessment of discharge planning because it is an examination of characteristics of people who are in intensive case management for longer than 5 years. I'm going to speak to the findings of the study, and Todd will speak to the implications, the practice implications related to the findings. I would also like to acknowledge the contributions of Tim Obry, Emmy Titterington, and Ariane Magny in the study as well. Did you know that the average wait time for entering CMHA Ottawa services is approximately 3 years? This long wait time is due to many reasons, mostly systemic, such as lack of much needed funding for community mental health services. But another factor is related to client flow. When people move on to less intense services when they are ready, space is made for new clients to come into CMHA programming. The purpose of the study was to examine the characteristics of people who stay in intensive case management for a long time, which we defined as longer than 5 years. Few studies have looked at length of time in ICM, the process of ICM graduation, again, speaking to the contribution of Valerie and Ali's needs assessment. Also, few studies have looked at who stays in ICM longer than others and client outcomes after graduation. We wanted to contribute to this research need, but primarily we wanted to contribute to this information need within CMHA to provide information on characteristics of people in our services for longer than 5 years. This is an example of a study that we conducted using client administrative data. So it was a secondary analysis and we didn't need to collect additional information except what we already gather through our provision of services. So one thing you could think of is other questions that might be common in the organization that could be answered in this sort of way or with the variables that I'm presenting here. We started with a sample of 1,073 active ICM clients. So they were active from April 2012 to March 2022. And within that sample, we created 2 subgroups. There were 531 people in ICM for less than 5 years and 289 in ICM for 5 years or longer. We compared differences across the 2 groups using t-tests and chi-squares, and then we tested predictors of being in the 5 years or longer group using logistic regression. And this is a very busy slide, but it shows the variables that were included in our model. So these were the characteristics that we explored to see if we could predict who was in that ICM for longer than 5 years group or who was in an ICM for less than 5 years group. We used the Gelberg-Anderson model to categorize our variables and to decide when to enter the variables at different time points in our regression model. These were the results of our t-tests and chi-square analysis. The group, so if you look at the right-hand column there, the group who were in ICM for 5 years or longer were older, had higher prevalence of co-occurring substance use disorder with severe mental illness, had higher prevalence of chronic health conditions, a lower proportion were returning ICM clients, and they had lower doses of ICM in contacts and in lengths of contacts, so shorter lengths in contacts. And they were in at least one other CMHA Ottawa program as well. To note, when doing these t-tests or chi-squares, there were obviously variables that were not significant. So there were no differences between the groups on community functioning, on presenting issues, like presenting issues around homelessness or legal issues. And there were no group differences related to primary diagnosis of mood disorder or psychotic disorder. When we ran the logistic regression, we found that we could predict 84% of the people in the less than 5 years in ICM group, and we could predict 46% of the people in the 5 years or longer group, which is a pretty good model. We found that it's similar to the t-tests and chi-squares, but people who were older, just want to make sure everyone can see my screen there. Okay, people who were older, people with a primary diagnosis of psychotic disorder, people with co-occurring substance use disorder, a chronic health condition, at least one other chronic health condition, or those who were in another CMHA program like a CD group were more likely to be in the group of people who were in ICM for 5 years or longer. And then people who were returning ICM clients and people with a higher dose of ICM, so more contacts more frequently, were more likely to be in the less than 5 years in ICM group.
So now I guess it's my turn, Marianne.
Yeah,
Thank you
thanks,
very
Todd.
much. Yes. So I imagine everybody's thinking that, wow, what kind of things can you do with this information, and all kinds of thoughts and ideas. And again, going back to Valerie and Allie's presentation as well, there's a lot of implications associated with research like this that can help us create access to services for clients and possibly help clients flow through services in a more conscientious manner. So we'll touch base on some of the implications. Next one. So people with chronic medical conditions and co-occurring substance use stay in ICM longer, which is highlighting areas for requiring additional supports, right? And what would those supports look like? Would it be something in the community? Could it be creating more access to concurrent disorders treatment groups, but possibly requiring further supports as well? And how do we look at utilization management? Are people accessing our concurrent disorder groups if the co-occurring substance use disorder is holding people back? And so there's implications there as well that lead into other programs and how we support getting clients into those services. So no association between function and length of time in ICM shows some people may be ready for graduation who aren't being closed. And why is that? We may hear things like we're the only person in the individual's life. There's a lot of different reasons for that, but then what are the opportunities? Are there opportunities for peer engagement? Allie and Valerie's presentation spoke of a client alumni group, or some other ways to connect people to a community outside of professional services. And then people in intensive case management longer have lower number of contacts, less intense service may meet their needs. And so that's the low dose kind of service, and why is that? Again, is that because somebody, you're the only person in someone's life, or they're doing more counseling stuff with clients, or or is it also in relation to, you know, the high quality of the therapeutic alliance that's been created, but on the flip side, the difficulty that brings when it comes to disengaging with individuals and having those hard to have conversations or not feeling supported in doing so.
Thanks,
That's
everyone.
it for this. Thank you.
If you'd like to find out more, you're welcome to email us.
That's great. I really like how there's so much that links, obviously, and it makes for the case of how you build on the knowledge that we're generating and link these studies together in-house for us here. Okay, so our next presentation is a review of best practices of antipsychotic medication initiation. And this is presented by Frank Jimbo, who is another medical student that provided us with this work. And this is also a taped presentation at the last minute. Unfortunately, Frank was unable to be here in person. He did a presentation for us here with the staff, and I don't know if he's going to share this today in this presentation, but at the end he said he was now convinced he was going to be a community psychiatrist. So, job done.
Donna, I think we have the needs assessment next.
Oh.
Number 3, unless I'm missing something.
Well, maybe yes. All right. Let's do the needs assessment of the healthcare needs of people with severe mental illness experiencing vulnerable housing. And then we'll hear from Frank. So this is Elisa Stragapede, Crystal Tierney, and Stella Young, who are psychology graduate students at the University of Ottawa and worked with us with investigating primary healthcare needs, which we've just learned is one of the chronic health conditions that leads people to remaining in service for a long period of time. So take it away. Is Stella going to start, or Crystal?
I will be. Crystal and I are going to do it. Stella couldn't join us today,
Awesome.
unfortunately. Yeah, so I'll be starting off. So yeah, as Donna was saying, we'll be presenting our CMHA needs assessment. So we were evaluating the primary healthcare needs of clients with severe mental illness who are vulnerably housed and homeless. And as Elisa mentioned, Stella won't be joining us today, so we'll be doing the presenting. Some of the reasons that this needs assessment is so important is, as we're slowly coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, there's definitely an impact on access to primary health care. Other reasons are just the general lack of primary health care providers in the Ottawa and surrounding region, and the general impact of healthcare on our overall mental well-being. So starting off with our assessment objectives, we're really looking to gain a better understanding of client primary healthcare needs. And this includes identifying the barriers and enablers to addressing those needs. So we really wanted to focus on, like, 1, what are the needs that are present, but 2, what are the current services looking to address these needs, if there are any, and then what is working towards addressing these needs, what is working, and then what isn't. And we did this both internally at CMHA Ottawa, but then also externally to get a feel for what's happening out in community as well. And then lastly, we really wanted to make sure that we offer actionable recommendations that are useful in terms of the findings. Going over our methods, we conducted qualitative and quantitative data collection. We had 3 focus groups. So this included one with frontline staff, the nursing team, and then we also had a lived experience group. And this lived experience group was pulled from PEAC, so the Peer Engagement Advisory Council. Within those focus groups, we conducted some activities such as SWOT, which stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So this really hones in on focusing on what's going on internally in terms of enablers and barriers, and then also externally in terms of enablers and barriers. And then we also did some affinity and criteria weighing exercises, which really focuses on prioritizing which needs are most important at this point in time. We did thematic analysis of the qualitative data collected from the focus groups and descriptive statistics analysis using unique client data records. So these are the findings from the needs assessment. In the center, we have what we found from the client data records. So most clients having a secondary mental or physical condition, most folks staying in programs for over 1 year, and most people being unemployed. The reason why we used themes in our findings is really because we noticed that a lot of people were saying similar things in focus groups, but really using different languages. So we really wanted to create a unified language so that everyone is on the same page when we're moving into recommendations and figuring out what are we going to do from here. We want people to be able to understand, is it specifically access to GPs that we need, or is it more that we need specifically prescribers? So that those kind of differences in languages can be really important. We also use themes because we noticed that given the context, a theme might be different. So an example of that is accessible and trauma-informed care was a strength at CMHA Ottawa, but then it was also a barrier outside of CMHA Ottawa. So we have improving continuity of care, patients experiencing their care as being connected and coordinated as they move between healthcare providers and through the healthcare system. And then we have some quotes at the bottom here. So one being, we see people who fall between the cracks in the healthcare system. Emphasizing client advocacy, the ability to help clients communicate their needs with healthcare providers to make informed decisions about their care. It's not really clear about what services are available and for who and how you access them. Addressing bureaucratic barriers, addressing the rigid structures currently in place that require a client to fit into the current structure of care, as opposed to offering a person-centered approach. I think we have a really doctor-centric system, and that's always the barrier, that's always the bottleneck. And lastly, accessible and trauma-informed care. The importance of using an approach to care that considers client experiences and physical and psychological well-being when providing care. We meet the clients where they're at. And with that, I'll pass it off to Elisa.
Thanks, Crystal. So yeah, just going off of that, those themes really helped to guide our recommendations. And as Crystal mentioned, we really wanted to create recommendations that emphasize this unified language. So just to start, we included both short and long-term recommendations. So I'll start with more of the short-term ones, first being toolkits. So we had a couple ideas for the recommendations here, specifically creating a resource handbook to really outline all the services that are available to clients, both at CMHA Ottawa and in the community. Those with lived experience really emphasized this need for knowing what the services are and wanting to engage in them, but just not really knowing how to access them, when in their care they should access them, etc. And similarly, a healthcare toolkit, which just consists of basic personal health supplies. We're hoping that this could translate into more of a long-term helpful recommendation, whereby clients can get these personal health supplies early on and kind of attend to their care on their own, giving them that autonomy in order to help them long-term. Some more short-term recommendations are these action plans. So one thing we noticed is that for these updated safety plans, some participants were calling them crisis plans, others were calling them safety plans. And after some discussions in our course, actually, we decided to go with the updated safety plans as the name for them. Not only will it be able to set guidelines for clients and those they may encounter in cases of emergencies, but it really helps to reduce that stigma that's often associated with crisis plans and that label. For our long-term recommendations, we did offer a basic needs drop-in. So this would provide clients with a safe space to access basic services and possible health and mental health services as well. It would be an opportunity to strengthen rapport and collect data by means of a voluntary survey. And it would act as a step towards our final long-term recommendation, which is a nurse practitioner-led clinic. So this would really enhance the continuity of care for clients by creating solutions to the doctor-centric system and the bottleneck. So really addressing those bureaucratic barriers and increasing the internal control at CMHA Ottawa over the largely external barrier to healthcare. So we just wanted to touch on ways we can improve and what we learned from this needs assessment. So the first thing being, it's really not easy to leave your biases at the door, despite how much we do try and continuously tried to do this. We were consistently acknowledging our privilege and our place as evaluators. And really using triangulation of quantitative and qualitative data with the current literature in order to mitigate that bias. But we did notice that there could have been possible selection bias in recruitment for the focus groups, especially those with lived experience, which kind of takes us on to our next lesson, being that a good evaluation really does take time. So because we did this in the course at U Ottawa, we did have some time constraints, and it really limited our ability to connect more with clients and staff, build those relationships, and better understand the groups we were working with, which is obviously very beneficial to any form of research or evaluation. And then just branching into our next steps of this evaluation as we come to the end of our presentation. Of course, we have this Bright Ideas presentation today, which we're so grateful to be a part of. We know that by sharing our evaluation findings here, it's going to be encouraging the use of the needs assessment findings and recommendations. Long term, we would love to publish the results of this evaluation into a program evaluation based journal, really to increase the visibility and contribute to the understanding of these complex primary healthcare needs. And finally, we really want to encourage accessibility of these findings and participation in recommendation and improvements to primary healthcare services beyond staff, and really incorporate clients into these findings as well. Lastly, we just want to thank our stakeholders for their involvement in our needs assessment. We really enjoyed it, and we learned so much about everything going on at CMHA and just what could be done down the line. So thank you so much, and thanks to Bright Ideas for putting this on.
Thanks, you guys, and thanks for your, it was a complex project to undertake in the time that you had, so you did a great job. So now we're going to move on to a presentation by Frank, which is the review of antipsychotic medication.
Hello, everybody. My name is Frank. Today I'm presenting my project. It was on the initiation of antipsychotic medications in community mental health. I'm not able to join you guys today because I'm in a placement currently in Englehart in Northern Ontario. So I'll be presenting virtually through this recording. So the aim of my project was to create a set of guidelines that follow the best practices for initiating antipsychotic meds in community mental health setting. So this, I wanted my guidelines to also be practical enough to be able to be used by just clinicians or people working with CMHA. So they're essentially just a synthesis of the various existing guidelines on the treatment of psychotic patients that are more targeted, though, for the patient population that we're dealing with at CMHA. So these includes patients with psychosis, but also with co-occurring psychiatric conditions, unstable housing, non-adherence to medication, history of non-compliance with treatment, and so on and so forth. So these are basically, the guidelines are made by looking at the various other clinical guidelines related to patients with schizophrenia. So among the ones that I used were the APA guidelines, the Canadian Schizophrenia Guidelines, the WFSPB guidelines, and a couple of others. I compared and contrasted them and basically synthesized the relevant information for the patient population that I mentioned before and tried to adapt them to CMHA's needs and context. So here is an overview of the table of contents of everything that is included in the guidelines. I won't be going over everything here, but they're found in the full document. And just to start presenting somewhat the more important sections. So this first section here, speaking about the assessment, outlines the most common side effects. So the motor, metabolic, and hormonal side effects that you can get when being under the influence of these drugs. It also covers an assessment schedule, and the assessment schedule really tries to cover all the side effects and around what time they may present. This is a therapeutic approach for what you may use for a patient presenting with the first episode of schizophrenia. It's not the most relevant for our patient population because most of our patients at CMHA will have repeated episodes, but this is still an interesting procedure to follow for choosing an antipsychotic when it's a first approach. Also to note, there should be always a combination of pharmacological and non-pharmacological treatment, which is something that CMHA does well, and that I will get into later in the presentation. So here is a therapeutic approach for patients presenting with multiple episodes of schizophrenia. And the main difference between this and the previous slide is that these patients have a history of repeated episodes of psychosis. This is also probably closer to CMHA's target population. And the guidelines stay relatively similar here. The only difference is that the treatment here must be continued for much longer. So whereas you could kind of stop the treatment after 18 months for patients with the first episode that respond well to medication, for these kinds of patients, you want to maybe keep it up to 2 to 5 years. Also, another recommendation here would be to include or to counsel or push for the use of long-acting injectable antipsychotic medication because they've been shown to increase compliance. But obviously, some patients may not be comfortable with being injected with needles monthly, and that may cause an issue in and of itself. So always, discussing with the patient is really important. And this is also the last therapeutic approach. So for treatment-resistant schizophrenia, which turns out to be a good deal of the patients, about 40%. Here I've added to the guidelines some recommendations for how to deal with these patients, mixing and matching different medications and so forth. So here, these are some recommendations from Health Quality Ontario, just on other things that could be done on top of medical treatment to really improve the care of these patients. These are all areas that CMHA already targets. So housing, CBT, and other just therapies, promoting physical activity and wellness, smoking cessation, substance use disorder, and employment and occupational support. So all very important things that help support the recovery process on top of medication. Finally, in the guidelines, I also included something on just patient education because it's medication compliance is one of the biggest issues with this patient population. And so just having something like a one-pager that the patients would be able to take home with them, or just to get better insight into what they're being treated for, why they're being given this medication, why they're feeling this or that way. This can be a good first step in educating patients and in increasing medication compliance. So thank you for listening to my presentation. This was it, and I hope you have a good day. Bye-bye.
That was great. And I really appreciated what Frank emphasized at the end, all of the other social determinants of health that we really focus on here in terms of providing support on top of the medical intervention as well. So that was great to see. Wonderful to hear from a hopeful future community psychiatrist. So our last grouping of presentations are focused on implementing services that work. And the first presentation is on an evaluation of our court outreach systems navigation position within the court outreach program, and presented by Carrie Dirksen and Danielle Machado, who are clinical psychology interns at the University of Ottawa. So welcome, Carrie and Danielle.
Thank you so much. I'll just get this sharing properly here. All right, so thank you so much. Yes, so as Donna said, I'm Carrie. Daniel will be helping me with this presentation as well of the Court Outreach System Navigator position. Sorry, I'll just get this positioned a bit better here. All right. So the Court Outreach Program offers outreach services that include mental health care, community support, assistance navigating the criminal justice system. Services can include assertive outreach, clients and systems advocacy, symptom management, life skills teaching, supportive counseling, family support, and crisis intervention. So the program's been around since 1995, and historically, referrals and intakes to the program are completed by staff on a rotating basis. So in this model, staff would do the intake, and they'd also provide minimal supports from the time of intake to when the client would be assigned to an outreach worker. But as the program began to get more referrals, as it has, this started to pose problems both in terms of the wait times for clients as well as the job demands for outreach workers. So the navigator role is really designed to mitigate these challenges. Just see there's a chat here. Just someone leaving. The navigator role is designed to mitigate these challenges. The role initially began in 2019. Person in the role works on site during the mental health court, so they're available to liaise with community partners, conduct intakes in a timely manner, all in conjunction with their time at the courthouse. And then after intake, the navigator is solely responsible for providing initial supports to clients. So upon release until their referrals are completed. And this includes referrals to court outreach workers within the court outreach program. So because the navigator role has now been around for several years, so since 2019, the CMHA team wanted an evaluation of how the role is functioning, as well as because the role has kind of shifted over time, what would be the benefits and drawbacks of having the role centralized to one individual versus split between multiple. So to conduct this evaluation, we collected administrative data from CMHA about the clients the navigator serves, as well as interviews with key stakeholders about their perceptions of the strengths and weaknesses of the navigator position. So this included a focus group with 8 court outreach workers, as well as interviews with community partners, including 2 partners in healthcare and 5 in justice-related professions. So you can see here that referrals to the system navigator position are quite high, and they've nearly doubled from 2021 to 2022. So there was 119 referrals in 2021 and 209 in 2022. So clearly a much used and much needed service. This is just some brief information just from 2022 about where referrals to the system navigator come from. So you can see that the main sources are defense and duty counsel, with a proportion coming from the mental health court as well. And then this graph just shows where the system navigator is referring clients to. So you can see that most referrals, 68, end up being to the court outreach program at CMHA once there's an available worker. And then you can also see here that there's a number of clients who have their needs fully met by the system navigator. So in this year, 15 clients, and do not actually require an external referral. So now I'll pass it off to Dan to continue.
Thanks, Carrie. So moving on to interview findings, I'll be discussing 4 main categories. First will be centralization of the system navigator position versus sharing the role between multiple outreach workers. Next, client outcomes specific to the system navigator position. Then interprofessional outcomes. And lastly, determinants of effectiveness for an individual in the role. Interviews revealed a unanimous preference for centralization of the system navigator position versus sharing the role. Interviewees described finding their day-to-day as much calmer and more manageable, less chaotic, so very strong descriptors there. And they also described many benefits and positive outcomes. One interviewee summed up client outcomes by stating that system navigator support ensures clients are always getting something. This something could be, for example, help with applying for legal aid or ODSP, or access to medication. This was contrasted with decentralization, in which clients would often sit idle on the wait list while waiting for intensive care to become available. The navigator offers important initial engagement to clients, which helps build rapport and facilitates more comfort during intake. This initial engagement also provides support during a critical time in clients' lives. which helps them gain a quicker release from custody and a greater likelihood of being left without a criminal record. It also improves the triage process, with clients more likely to receive relevant services at an appropriate time. The process of matching clients to caseworkers was also viewed as streamlined, which helps clients get paired with court outreach workers whose skill sets best meet their individual needs. And if a referral is deemed most appropriate, the navigator was seen to help these occur more quickly by providing a single point of contact for community partners. So essentially, the navigator was seen as supplying the grease in the wheel that keeps things moving more smoothly than they otherwise would, as well as providing continuity of care and support that's a much more client-centered process. In terms of interprofessional outcomes, interviewees reported that the system navigator provides benefits both within CMHA and with outside partners. Court outreach workers described a reduced burden due to not having to be involved in administrative duties or handling day-to-day communication with community partners. It was also stated that internal meetings were shortened by hours, given that the navigator would handle the matching duties herself, as opposed to during decentralization when court outreach workers would handle intake on their own. With respect to community partners, they also reported a streamlined workflow, as they had a consistent point person to go to about client matters and received consistent messaging in return. This role consistency was also viewed as strengthening relationships with the Crown and the judge, which are vital in this program. Interviewees communicated a strong belief that the specific individual in the role of system navigator is a key to its effectiveness. So on this slide, you can see some of the adjectives used to describe what makes the system navigator effective. Things like being organized, diplomatic, trustworthy, knowledgeable and experienced, confident, assertive, possessing leadership skills, and able to handle challenging clients. In terms of improving the position, there were a few key points, none of which related to the individual in the role currently, but rather were limiting factors that constrain the role's effectiveness from increasing further. First, although a single person in the role was viewed as a determinant of effectiveness, it was also viewed as a potential limiting factor due to the volume of the workload in the role, which could support multiple people. It was suggested that there would be benefits to adding another person to the role, but that this person would have to be similarly knowledgeable and experienced as the current system navigator. Secondly, interviewees described pressure to be always opening and closing cases due to the demand for services. Further, they believed more resources are needed to meet this demand more effectively and efficiently. So things like housing, nursing, and ongoing psych support. It was also stated that such pressure can create demands outside of the CMHA purview, and that possibly clearer eligibility criteria may be needed. Lastly, there is the view that better methods of tracking client outcomes, like circumstances of referrals and number of clients served, are also needed. This could help improve services and demonstrate where the program's succeeding, which could help with increased funding efforts. So to summarize the main findings of the interview data, the discussion overwhelmingly focused on the benefits of centralization. It was mentioned that clients are more likely to receive consistent support and desired programming, and less likely to have a criminal record. Also, this early interaction with the navigator facilitates efficiency both internally and externally, and has myriad interprofessional benefits as well. The system navigator is a high demand role that requires a specific skill set and demeanor to be most effective. And an overburdened system, of course, limits the effectiveness of the navigator, as does a perceived lack of resources. Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks. That was really great to hear about the court outreach program. when you said it's been here around since 1995, I was like, holy smokes, I remember when that program started. Okay, so our next presentation is from actually one of our staff here, Omar, who was actually doing program evaluation work at the university, and with Carrie Dirksen as well, helping out a formative evaluation of our Recovery College pilot program here at CMHA. So welcome to Omar and welcome back, Carrie.
Thank you, Donna. Thanks, Carrie. As Donna said, our evaluation is a formative evaluation of the CMHA Ottawa Recovery College pilot program. And I'd like to start by talking about what are recovery colleges generally. So recovery colleges are a learning space where individuals with history of mental health challenges come and take free courses to support their well-being and recovery. So something special about the recovery colleges is that individuals who take classes are college students, but they also contribute to the development of the courses and to their delivery also. That means a student, excuse me, a student of a recovery college can at the same time help create a course, offer a course, and take another. The courses offered are vary greatly, but they all relate to mental health, recovery, and well-being as a whole. For example, courses can be about managing loneliness, making peace with anger, exploring self-esteem, building health relationships, and so on. The values that underline recovery colleges include collaborative, a focus on strength, on the person, and on communities. So now, if we go back to the specifically, CMHA's Ottawa Recovery College was started in January 2021, and it was developed based on a toolkit made available by the CMHA at the national level, which you can see its title there. In Ottawa, the program was developed and implemented with the help of the CMHA Peer Engagement Advisory Council, who are present or past clients of the organization. The goal of the program is almost the same as the goal of the recovery colleges in general, which is really to support the recovery and well-being of individuals with mental health challenges and other related issues. Right now, Ottawa program is trying to create and deliver courses, but because of financial limitations, they are only able to include current or past clients of the CMHA as students. Clients of the CMHA's Ottawa are usually individuals, as I said, who experience severe mental illness and have histories of vulnerable housing. Now, we have evaluation questions here, where 6 main research questions that focus on the delivery of the program activities, on the co-creation of courses, and on the level of satisfaction of the students. And I will leave that the rest for Carrie, such as methodology, program strength, some of the results and recommendations. Thank you. Welcome, Carrie, please.
Great, thanks so much, Omar. So for this evaluation, we used both quantitative and qualitative methods of evaluation. So we collected administrative data to learn more about the activities of the program, including how many courses have been created, how many have been run, and how many students have been involved. Then we also took a look at student surveys, which were completed by 18 students who have taken Recovery College courses. They provided ratings of satisfaction and recommendations for program development. And then we also conducted a focus group with 6 facilitators from the Recovery College. So the pilot program so far has delivered 31 different courses. They've also co-created with students 11 courses. They've engaged 80 unique students, and students can take multiple courses. So, taken together, these 80 students who are taking multiple courses, there's been 356 total participations in courses. So now I'll talk about overall strengths and recommendations of the program so far, both from the student surveys and the facilitator focus group. So facilitators really emphasize that the process of the co-production of courses was a huge strength of this program. So they said that individuals really take pride in the process of being involved throughout a course's development, all the way from kind of the initial stages to facilitating the course. And facilitators talked about how co-production was really a team effort where everyone's ideas were heard and valued. Facilitators also talked about the students themselves being a huge strength of the program. So they said students are a necessary ingredient. They're often enthusiastic and bring positive energy to the course. And there were also benefits that students gain from participation. So things like increased knowledge about themselves and course topics, resources, and coping strategies. And we saw this in the student report as well. So you can see this graph here from the student surveys that about 60% of the students who completed the survey strongly agreed that the course improved their knowledge about the topic, and nobody disagreed with this statement. I'll go through a few other benefits here. So we also found certainly positive relationship outcomes to participating in Recovery College. So facilitators described that students were comfortable in class and that they can really foster a sense of unity and growth. I've just got a couple graphs from students to show this too. So again, here you can see about 80% of students who attended really strongly agreed that they felt welcomed and included in the class. And here too, that the course instructors themselves really encouraged them to share about the topic in a way that felt safe and respectful. And again, just under 80% strongly agreeing with that statement. And then just one more benefit I'll briefly touch on. So there was definitely some benefits related to online course delivery, which has been the main method of course delivery. So facilitators discussed this allowed students to participate how they're comfortable, so they could choose whether to have their camera on and off, and if they're not comfortable speaking, share through the chat box. So definitely some strengths associated with that. And then I'll just end by talking about some recommendations. So facilitators certainly really talked about the main recommendations just being to expand access of the Recovery College. This was a pilot project and really taking it forward. So a few examples of how to expand access would be holding Recovery College classes on evenings and weekends, as opposed to right now, they're just on weekdays. Also expanding access in terms of the clientele. So making sure that clients who are discharged from CMHA continue to be able to access Recovery College, and as well serving the wider community. And this is both because this is such a wonderful service, and also because this would really increase the diversity of perspectives and the diversity of people within the Recovery College, which everyone saw as a benefit. And then also a desire for more in-person services. So while people talked about online courses having benefits, in-person courses especially might allow for greater fostering of relationships, and as well within co-production, more ability to bounce ideas off each other and that kind of thing. There was also a desire for an increase in support for co-production. This was both through in-person sessions, as well as through ensuring adequate and timely financial compensation for those who are involved in co-production, just because those involved can be in precarious financial situations. So then this really helps improve the accessibility of that involvement. And then both students and facilitators expressed interest in expanded course content and community partnerships. So suggestions for community partnerships were Psychiatric Survivors of Ottawa, Kind Space, Parkdale Food Centre, Causeway Centre, and Employment Ontario, just to kind of broaden the scope of what types of topics could be covered in Recovery College. And then students also provided a bunch of qualitative responses about what they'd love to see from future courses. So I won't go through all of them here, but you can see a lot of topics that support life skills, help coping with symptoms, that type of thing. So just to conclude, the pilot program has really been successful. Facilitators and students both discuss finding value and fulfillment in participating, and challenges and recommendations for the program were primarily related to expanding the capacity to serve a greater number of individuals. So that's all for us. Thank you so much. And I will pass it back to Donna.
Thanks very much. And thank you, Omar, for choosing to do this with Carrie. The program's a small little initiative, but it really helps to build the case for us to hopefully be able to increase capacity. That's certainly called for. So our next presentation is focusing on developing an organizational culture of supervision in community mental health. And this is a video presentation presented by Jason Platts and Teresa Muhlenstein, both of whom are, I'll say, longstanding managers here in clinical services at CMHA Ottawa. I think Teresa is actually on the call as well.
Thanks to whoever introduced us. We'll just quickly introduce ourselves. I'm Jason. I'm a program manager at CMHA. I've been here since 2008.
And I'm Teresa. I'm also a program manager at CMHA Ottawa, and I've been here longer than Jason.
A lot longer.
Thanks.
So we're here today to talk.
Oh, sorry.
About a new initiative at CMHA.
Okay.
Hi, I'm just returning a phone call from an Erin at Extension.
Okay, we're just gonna have to go like this.
Which is our clinical supervision model that we've been working on developing with a professor from Carleton University named Karen Sewell.
So we're just going to go over briefly why we're doing this, how we're doing it, and where we are now and where we want to go with this.
So currently, there's not a whole lot of literature on clinical supervision for case management. So we're kind of at the forefront of creating a model for case management services in supervision. And we're doing that, as I said, with Karen Sewell. The purpose of this is we want to really improve the way we do clinical supervision, so we can improve client outcomes, so we're providing the best possible service we can for clients. Traditionally, we would have used a model of supervision that was based more on sort of caseload review, and what we're moving into is focusing on the growth and development of the staff that we're supporting, what's coming up for them in relation to the work that they're doing, as well as the interventions that they're using with clients.
This is based on a strengths-based approach to supervision and identifying the need for the relational aspect of the supervision relationship. So this was born out of a desire from all the staff and an investment from the management and the leadership at CMHA in Ottawa to really create this model.
So how did we get started? Karen, so we started with Karen about 1.5 years ago, halfway through the pandemic. And Karen started by sort of establishing focus groups with all the managers. When we embarked on this journey with Karen, we were in the process of collective bargaining. So at that time, we weren't able to work with the staff, but we have got to that point. So Karen had some focus groups with all the managers and the directors to sort of get a sense of what our experience in providing supervision has been. And she was trying to understand like what our values are, what we see as the competencies in clinical supervision, and where our strengths lie in providing clinical supervision. So
from this, she identified our training needs after we did a self-competency rating and the focus group that Jay was talking about. So then we started the implementation. We left it with Karen, and then she came back to us and we started. We'd always done clinical supervision at CMHA and supervision. And so we would meet individually with people. We met weekly as team for team supervision or resource team, and always ad hoc supervision. You know, we always had the critical incident debriefing available too, as well as some clinical consultation. The thing that we were missing was a systematic approach, structure, and standards to our clinical supervision.
And an area that we'll be looking at developing internally is to do more internal clinical consultation, so we can access that.
Yeah. So out of that came the approach. And the approach we based on some clinical supervision principles. So, you know, some really important ones too is the relationship between the supervisor and the supervisee, and that the responsibility of all members of that relationship to engage in the supervision process.
And we want to recognize and build on the strengths of the staff that are working with clients and address their professional needs, really work on developing them, helping them grow, and in turn, they'll be providing really good clinical support to clients, which would be the parallel process.
So the approach is also based on some theories that are out there. The theories at the organizational, the service level, and the supervision level. And what we've tried to do is integrate all these theories into the clinical supervision model that we've been trying to create here at CMHA Ottawa.
And the core components of CMHA we're strength-based, we're person-centered. So these are like the crux of our supervision model.
And we want to be able to provide consistent supervision. You know, it doesn't matter what team you're on, you're going to know what kind of supervision you're going to get.
And everybody at all levels of the organization will be receiving structured supervision.
So, you know, part of the structure of this supervision model that we've created includes some tools. So we've created a supervisory agreement, and this kind of outlines the roles and responsibilities of both the supervisor and the supervisee, and the limitations, and just what people are entering into. It's a yearly document that we would review. And again, it's, you know, something new to this model for us.
So another tool that we're using in supervision is a supervision session document. So this is a flexible, adaptive document that provides the framework for all supervision relationships. So you can see here, you know, it's collaborative agenda setting. So we co-create the agenda, what we're going to be spending time on discussing. Other components, like there's caseload, like looking at prioritizing things that are coming up in clinical work with clients and discussing that, troubleshooting things, problem solving, understanding what's coming up for staff. We also have a section on growth and development and what staff need, you know, to do the great work that they're doing. And we've also introduced like a feedback section. So every time we're doing clinical supervision, there's feedback on the session. Did everybody get their needs met? What was missing? What are some things that we could do to improve it? So this way, the supervision that we're providing is continually evolving. So Karen, she provided us with 8 sessions of clinical supervision.
Training.
8 sessions of clinical supervision training. So a lot of that was educational, theory-based, but it was also experiential in the sense that we were doing role plays and practicing the skills that she was teaching us. And she's continuing to work with us. Like we just recently finished those supervision trainings, and now Karen will continue working with us to teach us more skills or expand the education that she's already provided.
These topics were determined by focus groups and the competency self ratings that we did with the needs assessment at the outset of this project. And it's also based on best practices. So this is based specifically on the needs of the supervisors here at CMHA Ottawa. So that was really good that we could get that customized training. So we talked, the GSAT SR is the tool that we use now to do some self-competency ratings for supervision. It is a validated and well-used assessment tool. There are different versions of it, and we're just piloting if we are going to have our supervisees assess us using this tool as well. But yeah, it provides really good reflection and areas of needed attention sometimes.
So this is where we want to go. We now have a supervision policy. It's still in draft form, but this June it'll be finalized and it will be in our policies and procedures binder. And a part of this is that we're continually evaluating the supervision process. So we're continually improving what we're doing.
We have the opportunity now to include the staff voices. Now the bargaining is over, so we've done some focus groups. We are going to be meeting with them regularly in our consultation group to get input. So again, moving forward, our goal is to create a gold standard of clinical supervision here at CMHA Ottawa that everybody receives regularly, and that is sustainable and constantly being evaluated, and
it will become a part of our training as well. So for onboarding for new staff, new managers, everybody will be trained in clinical supervision.
Ideally, we would love to create a training that we could share with other agencies that provide community mental health services that don't have clinical supervision models out there. So that would be our ultimate goal.
And one last thing to add is that this is happening across. This is happening with all the CMHAs in Ontario. There's been discussion about clinical supervision, so we're contributing to that body of knowledge.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys in the virtual world. And last but not least, we have the collaborative research in mental health social work education from Brenda Morris from Carleton University, who's not here today, but Tim Simboli is. And also, I believe embedded in the presentation includes Cynthia Schreiber and Gallant and Corey Gosnick, who are MSW students. And Cynthia actually is not a student any longer, but works here at CMHA. So take it away, Tim. And this will be our last presentation. And we'll just have a few closing remarks by Todd Bridger, and then we're free Friday.
Thanks. So the last speaker is always the person standing between a group of people at lunch, and it's not always a comfortable spot. And Thanks for the introduction, Donna. Just to maybe provide some context in how these themes have evolved. I think many of the presentations that we've seen, wow, what a rich array. It's kind of mind-boggling, and how lots of connections being built as I'm seeing all these things. But one of the sort of underlying truths that has gone through a lot of this is the importance of the people who are doing the work, and that's whether they're supervisors, as we just heard from Jason and Teresa, or the people who are delivering the work, and how important that role is, how that is actually what we do and what we provide. And with that in mind, we came up with, we were talking, Brenda Morris and I were talking, it was actually Brenda taking the lead, about the work that she does as a professor at Carleton University, and an individual who has been responsible for student placements as well for Carleton, and has had a number of students, and I think maybe some of them are on the call right now, who have come to CMHA either as students or are now staff with us. And full disclosure, Brenda was the past president, or is the past president of CMHA. I think her tenure ended just before COVID hit, as a matter of fact. But we wanted to, she and a group of educators wanted to take a look at what's happening within the education system, and what's being done to prepare people coming through schools of social work at either the bachelor or the master's level to join the workforce and to have a career. And they invited a number of people to participate in a kind of a unique a unique way of doing research, and it was almost like a series of intensive self-reflective groups where you're both key informant and data collector, and it was a new way of doing things, and really quite interesting. And it actually led into a second piece of research, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I'm just hoping that this is showing properly. Donna, can you give me a thumbs up if you're seeing the slide? I think you are. This is a living exercise in teaching.
I can see the slide, but also the side slides as well.
Okay, well, you'll know where I'm going then. I don't know if I can.
If you go to the top, I think if you hit when it says from the beginning, that was, I think you had it right there.
That was it. That's it.
There you go. Woohoo!
Hooray! This is a living exercise in teaching old dogs new tricks. And the null hypothesis is you can't. But apparently, I got this far. But wait until I get to an embedded video that's in here someplace. Anyways, so there's actually two pieces. One is the discussion that I participated in, which is a cooperative inquiry research project, and it really brings together people from all different walks of life and all different jurisdictions. We had folks from Australia, very interesting meetings that were happening at 6, 7, 8 o'clock our time, and tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning in Australia, in New South Wales someplace, or Melbourne, or wherever they happen to be located. And there were a bunch of people in Ottawa. The second part of it kind of grew out of the first, and it was an effort to take students that were out on placement and try to draw as much as they could from the placement on a more longitudinal. So it wasn't just let's get out there and be in the work environment and see what that's like. It was really to find out more about the impact of being of choosing a career and choosing a place to work and being a social worker, and how your career might progress. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but I'll talk about the first one first. So we've been at it for about 2 years, believe it or not. Cooperative inquiry brings together a bunch of perspectives to share and generate knowledge. It pools papers that we've done, research that we've done, all of that sort of thing. It equalizes the power of being the researched and the researchers, and that's an interesting statement because it really it's more now having participated in it, it's more powerful than I would have thought. To consider yourself as a bit of a guinea pig in this, and to do a really long, deep dive into what you do. I have to say, I came away with a lot of realizations. It was a very healthy exercise. So we systematized it a little bit. We had regular online meetings. Those were transcribed. Those were analyzed. We did a lot of sharing documents. We built a paper collectively with a bunch of people. We were not just two countries, we were on two different continents. And we had people with lived experience that were joining in as well. Actually, my role was probably, this sounds kind of crude, but as a consumer of social work students, I was representing one of the organizations that takes social work students. So if you think of it in those terms, the university produces something and we consume something. So I was on the consumer side of that equation, but the end recipient was also represented, and we had some new students, new employees, senior people, people who had been around, people who are at the end of their career. We just put together this slide a second ago. You may recognize this the camera adds at least 40 pounds to me, and I don't need it. Cynthia Clark down here in the middle, you might recognize as the parent or the client advisory at the Royal Ottawa. Brenda Morris is over here in the down left corner. The other researchers, I'm not sure if any are on the call. They were invited, but I don't know if any of them made it. But these are delightful people who I only know through Zoom for the most part. They have been really provocative and great people to work with. So one of the things that emerged, it wasn't where we set out, was that we really felt that people coming out of university were put into careers that really called on them to kind of navigate how they did their work based on the context that they worked in. And there was a great quote from the UN that we discovered very late in the process that talked about transforming from a biomedical neoliberal approach to mental health to something that is more what we would consider in the community as social determinants of health kind of approach. That it's mental health practice for years was dominated by medical institutional kinds of thinking, and it really needed to be supplemented by more collaborative sorts of approaches. That was a very eye-opening kind of distinction for me, and that people coming out of social work would end up in those two worlds, or a blend of those two worlds. And it sometimes meant navigating based on the waters that you were in, if I could say it that way. If you were a social worker in a hospital, you would be navigating a very strongly medical dominated kind of environment, and you had to kind of pick and choose how you did your human rights, person-centered approaches, and all the things that you learned in university to working with the folks that you were helping. And that was a different environment than, say, if you came, I think, to a CMHA or a community-based agency where the values are very the sub-values are very person-centered, very rights-oriented, very justice-oriented, a much easier kind of and no value judgment assigned to that. Part of this was the learning was that in preparing social work students, you needed to prepare them for those kinds of environments and where they might be working. And the challenge was for the educators to take a look at at how they could not just sort of teach theory and practice, but actually prepare people for careers and career paths that might take them to different kinds of work. And this is kind of a long-term, a long look, 10,000-foot view of what we were talking about. There's the classroom environment, which often involves some sort of practicum kind of thing. There's your early career and what environments you go into and how those might change. But we also wanted to introduce the idea of where that career might go. So, what as your career advances, at what point are you, what pathway would make you comfortable? What do you know about that pathway? How do you prepare for that pathway? And in many cases, just to take the example of, or build on what Teresa and Jason were saying, what were the things that could be done in the MSW preparation while you're still on campus that would prepare you to be, down your career at some point, to move into a management or supervisory role, if that was your preference. So that was kind of where we went with that. There is a paper. It actually is being presented. I'll talk about that in a second. It's being presented at conferences and hopefully is to be published. The manuscripts are in right now, but that's kind of the gist of what it came up with. Then, and out of that, Brenda sort of took that and said, okay, what can we put into action now, and how can we enrich the opportunity? And what we so this is more of a program that was used for the placement students coming out of the MSW and BSW program at Carleton University. It involved us at Ottawa U, or at CMHA Ottawa rather, the folks at the Royal at the ROH. And it just kind of was an add-on to some of the placements that were going on. It was a more structured kind of interview between a social worker or a peer support worker in some cases, and students. And actually, I think they did it in teams. And then it required a little bit of synthesis on their part and a presentation of their findings. So sort of what did they learn. And now this gets really challenging for me because this is an embedded video, and I'm going to hope that I can pull this off. But it was Cynthia from CMHA and Anne and Corey, who were MSW students at Carleton University, and we'll let them talk in their own voice. So I'm going to.
Tim, we're not able to hear them.
Thank you. Okay, let me just see if I can, the volume, it says it's full here. I don't know how, does anybody have a clue as to how I add volume to this?
Well, maybe we have some divine intervention here, Tim, given that we are out of time, but we will have these links in the final link, so folks can listen to the videos at that time, and hopefully they'll play at that time. We'll make sure we check that out before we finalize the final version. Does that sound
thanks.
good?
Yeah, that's fine. I think I only have one more slide, but apologies to Cynthia, Ann, and Corey. They put together a video and reported in their own voice what the experience was like. But as long as we can make sure that that's in there, it did work earlier this morning when I tried it. But there you go. Let me go to the next one. So moving forward. The teaching mental health inquiry is coming to an end. Manuscripts are submitted. A second manuscript is under development. The paper itself is being presented in conferences in Denmark and Portugal next month, in a few days actually. A book chapter has been accepted. So there's a publication coming out from this. And for in terms of the second part of it, opportunities this is going to become a regular practice, I think, within the placements at Carleton University. And thank you we had 8 staff here and 16 students that paired up and did interviews and talked about what they were doing. And I really think everybody said it enriched the experience of having a placement. And I think that brings me, to the end. Well, back to you, Donna.
That's awesome. And that's our last presentation. So just very quickly, given the time here, I'm going to throw it over to Todd Bridger, our Manager of Quality Improvement and Quality Assurance, who has a few closing remarks for us before we are released. Take it away, Todd.
I can't share. Oh, there we go. Okay, great. So first, I'd like to say thank you to everybody for staying overtime for lunch. And if anybody would like to leave, please feel free to do so, of course. And you don't need to be, nobody needs to be told that for sure. Okay. And but if it's okay, I would like to take just a few minutes to thank everybody. We had 12 presentations today, representing 12 pieces of research, all geared towards improving services for clients, the experience of the service providers, people on the front line in our system of care, and the population that we care about. The research and evaluation was done with authentic input, and I emphasize the word authentic input in collaboration from our academic partners, students, CMH staff, and client advisors. And thank you to everyone who shared the considerable knowledge. It was truly co-designed. Final report of today's proceedings will be sent to everyone with a link to the recording and presentation slides. And thank you to Patrick Jodwin, I think, who's left, our Manager of Communications and Stakeholder Relations, and Julie Levesque, basically our Education Department, for helping making this possible. Thank you to Dr. Donna Petty, who has managed to keep research and evaluation a priority at CMHA Ottawa for over 2 decades. And thank you, Donna, because you have to hold on to these things or they can simply slip away. And thank you to everyone. And thank you to everyone who attended today, because we are all stakeholders in dissemination of knowledge as core function of healthcare improvement. So I have a couple of slides I'll go through now. So this is a Far Side comic. This invention will forever change the evolution of mankind. I call it the hammer and chisel, right? Not the wheel. And that's just to say that positive things happen, but they're not always easy to reproduce, right? And a lot of energy comes in looking for those things, and change occurs without studies or something to back up why the change is necessary. And that's the quote at the top. Why does any of this matter? Why bother doing research and evaluation for community health services? And the reason why it matters is the tool and the hammer can help us reproduce positive outcomes. And so that these wheels that become gears that go on and do other things, they have consistency in the quality and application of it. And the same thing goes with evidence-based practice, the quality and application of the services that we give to clients. But another reason is the primary function of research and evaluation for healthcare providers. So it's basically ensuring that health services use their resources to improve the health of the population in the most efficient way, high quality and cost effective or efficient. This is referred to as the quadruple aim that's employed by Ontario Health, the Institute of Healthcare Improvement, where they speak about better patient and caregiver experiences, better patient and population health outcomes, better value and efficiency, right? And better provider experience. I'll just, sorry. So then that brings us to what's referred to as the 3 R's for healthcare optimization. The right care, the right time, at the right place or setting. So if we're putting clients into services, and we heard this as a thread throughout today's presentations, that isn't the right service, and it isn't the right time, and it's not in the right setting, we're losing opportunities for other individuals to access the services, and not necessarily providing the best quality of care to the individual who's come through our doors for services. So when they speak about efficiency, it's not efficiency in saving dollars, but if you do reduce wasted time and travel, wasted going to service that isn't the right service, all these things, you do create more capacity for other people to access that service or to create more services to help the individuals who are already there. And that's the efficiencies. So how do we ensure our research and resulting improvements activities meet the needs of the clients and professions providing care? Well, we let go of our biases as professionals, and we've heard that as well. I think Tim mentioned that, the expert trap, right? Second, we listen for the needs of the clients, service providers, external stakeholders to identify areas of improvement. And third, we do co-design our research and improvement activities with input from everyone that might have experience in the matter. And this is what's referred to as experience-based co-design. And we heard about that in every presentation today, the number of external stakeholders and client advisors that have been involved in our research and evaluation activities. So while all changes do not lead to improvement, all improvement requires change. And I found this comic about with the bus, right? So the first slide is probably the administrator pushing the bus up the hill or trying to make something change and realizing how much effort that takes to get that bus up the hill. Meanwhile, the stakeholders in the back thinking, what the hell is that? What's that administrator doing, right? And then all of a sudden now they're involved, these clients, the staff or external stakeholders and other people, and now they're starting to push the bus a little bit. And then the administrator is, or the researcher or whatever is now driving the bus and getting the push. But ideally, you get to a place, and what we saw with these recommendations today and everybody involved, is the stakeholders get at the front of the bus. And then the people, the researchers and the administrators get in the back, and they enjoy the ride with everybody together. And why is that so important? Well, let's be honest. Change is very hard. What we always hear is, I'm frightened of change. Change is not necessary. I wasn't informed or involved in the change. Why don't we? Why don't we know what they are doing and they missed the mark? This change is not important to me. Why didn't they ask me what would help in the first place? And I'm tired of change. And we heard earlier about a SWOT analysis where people might be resistant to change as well. So this is the psychology change framework from IHI. I won't go through the whole thing, but it is quite interesting. And it's basically, how do you activate people's agency and change? And for instance, you unleash intrinsic motivation, you co-design with people, co-produce with people, you distribute power throughout the organization, and you adapt accordingly. So to end it all, thanks again to everyone, and hope you enjoyed the ride, and thank you for getting on the magic school bus to better outcomes for all, and enjoy your lunch.
Bye everyone. Thank you.